this bill and how you practically moved the thing along, but it may get buried in other negativity that has gone around in the media. But it deserves, I think, front page news, and I congratulate you again.
Senator van Turnhout.
Thank you very much, and very welcome to the House, Minister. And I'd like to begin in joining in with everyone else in commending Senator Quinn for his initiative in bringing forward this very important and necessary bill. And for me, certainly, I'd echo the words of Senator Byrne. This, for me, is part of the role of this House, and it's part of, for me, why we are here is to legislate. And the debates that we have should inform that legislation. But today is really getting down to business. So, obviously, I state from the outset that I wholeheartedly support this bill and its purpose. I think forced labour, unfortunately, is alive and well in Ireland, as is clearly demonstrated by the shocking exploitation of Muhammad Yunus and our laws, albeit unintentionally protecting the perpetrators. The High Court was correct in law to overturn the determination of the Labour Court to award €90,000 to Mr Muhammad Yunus for alleged breach of his employment rights, including payments well below the minimum wage, the imposition of extremely long working hours, 77 hours per week, with insufficient breaks and no days off, and the failure to renew his work permit, thus rendering him undocumented in the state and extremely vulnerable to the exploitation and mistreatment meted against him. And I think Senator Quinn very clearly elaborated on Mr Yunus's case. The High Court was correct in law because the law, as set out in Section 2 of the Employment Permits Act 2003, finds that Mr Yunus does not have a valid and legal work permit and as such cannot benefit from relief in respect of an employment contract. And I say it was correct in law, but it was not, and I stress, it was not just and right. And for me, part of the law is that we are just and right. And it's clear to me that Justice Hogan recognised this, and in overturning the award made by the Labour Court, he stated that Mr Yunus, and he said, has been the victim of the most appalling exploitation in respect of which he has no effective remedy. And Justice Hogan felt further compelled, as my colleagues have said, to send a copy of his decision to the Ceann Comhairle, to the Cathaoirleach and to the Minister for Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation, Richard Bruton TD. And Minister, I very much appreciate that Minister Bruton is currently working with the Office of the Attorney-General to examine options to address the lacuna in the Employment Permits Act 2003 arising out of the High Court decision. But I put it to you, and having given careful consideration to the bill, that this is a really viable and immediate option at our disposal to plug this legislative gap, which in real terms means protecting very vulnerable workers from exploitation by unscrupulous employers. And I don't think this is an issue that we have the luxury of time that can often take the legislative process. This is very immediate. The Migrant Rights Centre of Ireland has at present 30 cases of exploited workers in precarious situations with work permits at various stages before the Labour Relations Commission, for whom clarity, certainty and legal protection must be brought as a matter of absolute urgency. So I would urge all members in the Seanad to support this bill before us. But Minister, before I conclude, it would be remiss of me not to point out that while this lacuna in the law to which this amendment purports to remedy was unforeseen or unintentional in its impact, there is room for suggesting that this government is unaware of the negative and dangerous consequences of its failure to legislate against forced labour, either as a standalone offence or by amending the Criminal Law Human Trafficking Act 2008 to actually define forced labour. I do not believe that the current legislative protections afforded through ordinary criminal offences, such as false imprisonment, blackmail, assault, coercion, or indeed through the immigration or through health and safety law, are appropriate or sufficient given the profile of the victims and the likelihood that they will have neither the knowledge nor the confidence to evoke these protections. A standalone law or a clearly defined provision on forced labour in existing legislation would give victims confidence and act as a deterrent to their exploiters, which is increasingly necessary with anecdotal evidence suggesting that the recession is leading to greater recourse to very cheap free labour by unscrupulous employers. So I would like to use today's debate on this bill to call on the leader, to call on the Minister for Justice and Equality Alan Shatter TD, to publish the International Labour Organisation report on criminalising forced labour in Ireland, which I understood sought to assess what Ireland would need to do to become fully compliant with, amongst others, the ILO Forced and Compulsory Labour and Abolition of Forced Labour Conventions, the United Nations Supplementary Convention on the Abolition of Slavery, and Article 4 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The report exists. Let's publish the report. With 160 cases of forced labour in Ireland over the last 6 years, and rising, according to the Migrant Rights Centre of Ireland, I would call for us to have a wider Seanad debate about forced labour in Ireland. But in ending, I really would like to thank Senator Quinn for bringing this bill forward. It is a discrete piece of legislation that affects, in real terms, protects very vulnerable workers from exploitation by unscrupulous employers. So I think today we need to do this bill, but for me it's a first step of what we need to do in ensuring that we send a clear message that we do not tolerate forced labour in Ireland. We cannot go to other countries in the world and lecture about forced labour and yet tolerate it here on our own doorsteps. Thank you.
Senator Keane.
Thanks very much indeed, and I rise today because I do think this is such a serious issue, and thank you, Senator Quinn, for putting it on the agenda today.